Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Zach Metkler.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and today I am not joined by my usual partner in crime, although he is another partner in crime. If we had a heist, if there was ever, I guess Brian had to be the getaway driver, so I guess this is the guy who draws up the blueprints and tells us how everything's going to go, so the plan goes according to plan. The one professor, as we like to call him here, Mr. Zach Metkler. Zach, what's going on?
Not much. I like that description. I like to think that I can sometimes be the brain of some of the operations, and then sometimes I can just be the problem. So I think it's a good blend there.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not like the Snickers commercial where someone recognizes you and, you know.
I'll probably use, transparent pantyhose or whatever the guy was using on that one. I'll try to, be more slick with my movements.
Yeah, for sure. So Brian is on taking a vacation day today, and part of that reason too is because Zach and I were sitting out at Steelers training camp over the weekend. They reported on Friday. We got 3 practices under our belt, a whole slew of Steel City Underground folks, contributors, writers, podcasters, whatever you want to call us. We're all out there in force and checking out everything that the Steelers have to offer for this 2019 season. Looks like a very deep roster, and we're going to give you some of our thoughts. Probably, most surprising, some of them might be. Some of them are just going to be your run-of-the-mill, and then I think we have to get Captain Obvious out of the way when it comes to camp. I know there's been some buzz. Just so everyone kind of understands, if you've never seen the setup at St. Vincent College where the Steelers have camp, and they stay there. They don't stay in hotels or anything like that. They stay on campus. The dorms are air-conditioned, unlike, I think they got air conditioning like in the late 90s or early 2000s. I forget who was telling us that story. Maybe it was Bryant McFadden or somebody like that that played on one of the older teams. I'm trying to remember who it was. We've interviewed so many people. Maybe it was Tunch. Tunch may have even done it too. But anyways, they stay on campus. Yeah, they stay on campus, so it's very much, like a month of, these guys, it's team building. They're not like other teams where they go to some resort or something of that nature, or have something that's near the stadium and then they go to a Sheraton or something afterwards, So these guys are there, all the equipment's there for them to work out. They have some downtime. They're at the cafeteria. Some of them, sometimes they hang out with fans and whatever be the case. But there's 3 fields there, and usually they're using 2 of the 3 fields at the same time, and the defense is usually on the far field, which is a little more inaccessible when it comes to seeing what's going on until they get the offense and defense together on the same field, and then you're able to make some observations. So we probably have a little bit of less takes on the defense, and there's a few of the beat writers that have their privilege of being able to go over and be over on the defensive side and see some things. So take our observations as part of a bigger picture when you're reading all of these things about training camp, but I do like to think that a lot of ours are in line with some of the stuff that we've already seen, which, makes me feel kind of good, makes me feel like I know what I'm talking about. So without further ado, Zach, our superstar so far, and this is going to sound a little strange to our listeners to even bring this name up, because you would think, oh yeah, well, he's good already. Juju Smith-Schuster, I believe. If you look at 2018 Juju Smith-Schuster, 2019 Juju Smith-Schuster, they bumped his rating up if you were doing the Madden video game or something. It was like somebody went in and edited everything, and the guy is just a beast right now. He's all over the field. He's practically uncoverable, and he catches everything. It's like you're expecting him that, everybody's worried about Antonio Brown, leaving, being traded, and what's Juju going to do this year? And so far, it looks like Juju is going to make people make people think of him in the same conversation as like Julio Jones or like DeAndre Hopkins.
Oh, yeah. It's still really early in the process, but the first 3 days, he's played like a man possessed. It's not even close. There was always concern about how's he going to handle all the attention he's going to get without AB there. Is Ben still going to find the ball? Oh, he's not athletic enough to get off press coverage. He's not athletic enough to go down the field. What we're seeing from him so far is a man possessed who looks like he's focused. He's ready to take over this number 1 responsibility. and be the guy that Ben wants him to. And the chemistry with him and Ben seems to be that leading towards that Wi-Fi we saw so frequently between him and AB. If that's the case, I mean, opposing defenses should be pretty concerned about that because, I mean, he's playing well off the route. You know, he's getting off press coverage really well. He's beating guys with moves down the field. He's catching almost anything you throw at him with strong hands that we've seen from him over the last 2 seasons. It seems like you can't get much higher on him, but you can very much be higher on him and continue to get higher on him because he's playing out of his mind right now.
Playing out of his mind like a man possessed. I mean, it's, you know, a lot of people would probably think that's a hot take. If you're not there physically to see this, and there's a few clips that are up over on the Twitter, a couple of them I think I got over on Facebook too. Some of the video that I shot, or even some of our other guys like Eric Herman or Zach Celedonia. You know, it's mind blowing. I think everybody already liked Juju or loved Juju. He's already a favorite son of Pittsburgh, and he's just taken it to a whole other level during the offseason. Now, sticking just with the wide receivers, and you get to observe the receivers quite a bit. It's just one of these things where, you know, when they don't have the pads on for 2 days and are running around in shorts, this is pretty much what you see. You know what I mean? There's no tackling or anything like that when they're doing that. And then they had the pads on yesterday, of course, too. So, but Dante Moncrief, the free agent acquisition, played with the Jaguars with a bunch of horrible quarterbacks last year. Sorry to say that. I'm usually not that down on somebody, but Blake Bortles and Cody Kessler really weren't going to make Dante Moncrief look like a star. Dante Moncrief looks like the missing puzzle piece. You know, you were looking for that one and you couldn't quite make out which one fit in there, and you tried to put Justin Hunter in there or Darius Hayward-Bay or any other receivers over the years, and Dante Moncrief already looks like a great fit for the Steelers offense. I mean, a lot of what we're going to say sounds very optimistic, and it's going to sound like, you know, we're really blowing smoke up these guys, you know, butts. But I'm telling you, I don't know, recently being in a training camp, I remember looking at James Conner last year and him coming off the injury in year 2 and being like, wow, totally wow. Then there's other guys that kind of stand out. I was really wowed by Juju. I'm really impressed with Dante Moncrief, and another wide receiver I'm going to throw in here too is James Washington. Leaner, meaner. The guy could like probably jump over. There used to be this guy on American Gladiators. If anybody watched that, like, you know, in the 90s or whatever, and he used to jump over cars. He was one of the competitors. This is like James Washington. He could leap tall buildings in a single bound. He has huge hands. Just about everything that goes his way, he's catching as well. Anything in the back of the end zone, the corner, he gets up over people, makes combat catches, and he only had like the one ball we saw slapped away, and we're not quite sure now because Terrell Edmonds kind of corrected us. We thought it was Terrell Edmonds, but he says no. Maybe it was. Maybe we just had the blinders on, and it was Mark Barron instead. But there was a ball slapped away from maybe James Washington, and or no, it was Terrell Edmonds on that one. It was Terrell was correcting us on the one he got beat. He didn't want to say he got beat by McDonald, even though we still think it was him. But that's okay. But we'll be talking about Terrell Edmonds here shortly too, because he's had a great camp. And you know what? This is a good time to pause before I let you talk about these two receivers too, Zach. But we need to talk about this. Practice. It's practice. So if somebody gets beat, who cares? Even in a game, it's a microcosm of an entire season. There's 60, 70 plays maybe on average in an NFL game on one side of the football, and maybe one play does beat you because it's a close game, but it's a microcosm of the whole entire thing. It's not like, okay, this guy maybe got beat on this play and he's going to be garbage or a bum the whole season. These are professionals. They're competing, and you're going to have one side win over the other because that's just the way it works. So if we say somebody got beat or somebody dropped something, it's a grain of salt that you now doused and diluted with water. Please don't take a whole lot of stock into this. I think me and Brian said this on the last episode, because we're going to talk about quarterbacks, for example, and a rough start maybe with someone there. It's just a bad day in the office, and it's going to happen. Ben's had them over his career in regular season games. It's a big whoop-de-doo, but we're just reporting this to you. So don't go off and then be like, well, these guys said this guy sucks, or this guy's going to be with the exception of Juju, the next best thing since sliced bread. So Dante Moncrief, James Washington, what did you see, Zach?
Yeah, I think both of them are doing really well so far this camp. I would say Moncrief has pretty much, at this point until Washington shows a little bit more, I think is going to be your guy starting opposite of Juju for most of the time. I think those are your top three receivers at this point. I think Washington's going to fit naturally into that Z role. I think Moncrief's kind of stepping up. You're going to see more of him as the X, kind of replacing what AB was. Not at the same type of player by any means, but just that role with Juju as kind of your big oversized slot. But I think all three of them have some position flexibility. You can move them around, use them differently, especially Juju. I mean, we've seen Juju bump all over the place. He's been in the slot. He's been out wide. He's been in a bunch of stack formations. So I think you see a lot of opportunity to move him around and kind of being your utilized chess piece. The Moncrief, I mean, the chemistry was hyped up a lot during OTAs. It was hyped up during minicamp. A lot of times you're like, oh, well, it's football in shorts. They're not going against really any type of competitive defense due to what the NFL rules allow and don't allow. But Moncrief, I mean, anything Ben's throwing, it feels like he's making a big play every single team session. Every time they're doing one-on-ones with a corner, he's getting beat, or he's beating the corner. Every time he's going in team, Ben's looking for Juju, and it's almost like Ben's looking at Moncrief. He's making a very conscious effort to get him the ball, and Moncrief is living up to every single aspect of it. And I think that's kind of similar to what we saw from some of the early days of Moncrief and Andrew Luck, because since then, he's been plagued by inconsistent quarterback play, while still, I think, being productive for what you would expect from a guy who doesn't really have a consistent quarterback throwing him the ball. And I think you give a guy like Ben Moncrief, who is fast, he's tall, he's long, I think he can make some splash plays and be a really nice compliment to Juju. And Washington, like you said, it's like watching a leaf float through the sky whenever he's jumping up for the ball. I mean, he just floats, and it's so effortless. He's a really great job at high pointing the ball, which is something we saw from him last year in camp. His releases on his routes are much better. He looks a lot quicker off them. He's not getting jammed to the line nearly as much. With that new leaned, improved physique, I think that's going to bode for him well over the long haul. I mean, I think it's going to be a more better condition to play, more snaps when the Steelers call upon him. I think it's also going to be beneficial for him trying to get down the field and make moves. I mean, that added quickness and explosion off the line. We already know he's a vertical threat. That was his main sticking point at Oklahoma State. So I think seeing him be able to do that with a leaner physique, that better confidence we're seeing some more of this year, I think him and Moncrief are going to be perfect complements to Smith-Schuster whenever the season rolls around. Yeah,
it's a very important point that, that isn't being made by a lot of people is that Juju is playing in the slot. He's effective out of the slot, and we had kind of surmised that might be part of the case, and it's going to create a lot of mismatch problems, especially you look at, the big thing, we talk about the Patriots playing in the AFC East and, those teams laying down to them all the time. And it's like they're always built to make sure they beat those teams. And, the Bills and the Dolphins and the Jets are always trying to, at least the Jets were successful at this at one point. Rex Ryan put together a defense for them that was capable of beating Tom Brady. I look at the opponents in the AFC North, and I'm always hearing Browns, and we talked about this, after camp, Zach, and I'm looking at, the Ravens reloading and the Bengals and their issues, and I look at the center of the field. And I look at the linebackers and I look at some of the safeties. Now, of course, the Ravens are pretty loaded in their secondary, but they lost C.J. Mosley. And, these are kind of the things the Steelers had problems with ever since Ryan Shazier went down. And it looks like this may be fixed now with Devin Bush when we get to him. But more or less, the mismatches that are going to be caused, these three receivers, Juju, Dante Moncrief, James Washington, are making this look effortless. They're making it look easy. And Ben is making it look easy. And I think when we pair this with, when we start talking about some of the tight ends and running backs that are going to be combined with this, that middle of the field is going to open up so many different things because now, obviously one of the things that, Ben and Randy Fichtner, that they're good at is play action. And when you set that type of stuff up, man, Vance McDonald looks like a beast right now. And, I'm going to get to Vance in a second, but the other wide receivers, this is almost looking like it's kind of locked up. Now, I know Deontay Johnson had a big play on Brian Allen just yesterday. He's had a couple drops here or there. He's a rookie. He's going to be working his way in. He may be a special teamer as well. We've seen some of the kick return duties. There's basically boiled down to 5 guys. Originally last year, Ryan Switzer and Eli Rogers. They're still in that mix. I don't have to say a whole lot about either one of them. They've been solid through camp. They're pretty much the guys that you expect them to be right now. Then you have Deontay Johnson, who I just mentioned. Deontay Spencer, who's a smaller guy who come over from the Canadian Football League. We were talking about him, and he's looked as advertised too. He's looked quick, and he's looked good against a lot of the second and third team players, depending on who's throwing them the ball too, because don't forget, Ben's not throwing every pass to these guys. You got a rotation with Mason Rudolph. You got a rotation with Josh Dobbs. You also have a rotation with Devlin Hodges as well. And Ben had a day off entirely yesterday on Sunday too. So, you look at this. Johnny Holton got hurt. Trey Griffey and Tevin Jones, a little bit of a mixed bag there. They've had a couple drops here or there too. It's a very loaded and crowded wide receiver group. Spencer, if he's going to cut his teeth here, it's going to be as a return guy. By the way, the fifth return guy out of that group is Cam Sutton, one of the DBs. So just in case everybody's like, well, you only named 4. But, if Spencer has any shot anywhere, it's going to be as a value of doing this type of thing. And, he's a veteran player, even though it's in a different league. He has experience, in his back pocket. Johnny Holton had that experience and was looking a little sharp too. He just got hurt. You can't make a team if you're hurt. He's got to be out there, and if this is going to linger, unfortunately, he may even get released before camp's over, and they may bring somebody else in. So any closing thoughts on the receivers, Zach?
No, I think it's a really promising group. And kind of like you said, we'll talk about here with the tight ends and running backs. I think the guys they have in that room right now are going to allow Randy Fiegner to kind of go and have some mismatch nightmares for some of these teams, especially based on what you're doing. I think we've seen that with some of the exotic looks they've gotten, some of the combinations they put on the field. I think you've seen some opportunities that they'll try to exploit defenses based on whatever personnel they have on offense and whatever the defense is giving them. I think that's going to really bode well with them, especially when you're trying to replace someone like Antonio Brown, who was your, do it all, put him anywhere and flourish type of receiver. I think having guys you can move around the field is going to bode well for them. And really, I think, there is a drop off at the tail end of the receiver roster because you have guys that have lack of experience against top upper tier talent. But I mean, the top guys with Juju, Moncrief, and Washington, and then, if Switz and Rogers, I think they will do well. I think Deontay Johnson, once he starts getting his footing and get some of those rookie wrinkles out of the way, I think he could be a contributor as well early on. So I think this group they have there is going to be fun to watch. It's going to be weird not seeing 84 out on the field this year, but I'm excited to see what these guys can do once the actual action rolls around.
Yeah, I mean, Deontay Johnson, don't make any mistake about it either. I mean, he's pretty shifty too. Now, we pumped up all this about the receivers, and a lot of people are probably thinking, well, the Steelers secondary is trash. That's not going to be the case when we get to them because the defense has been winning their share, if not more, than the offense in a lot of these drills, and it's very exciting to see. But on account of where the offense sometimes wins, Vance McDonald, grown-ass man for sure, and very intense player, even, when they're not wearing pads. And then after him, I think a lot of people are probably interested. You got a handful of guys. You got a veteran like Xavier Grimble who made a fingertip catch at one point, then misses like an easy one. And things happen. Guys lose concentration and focus, and these things happen in games too. But you know who Xavier Grimble is. You've seen him before. You know what he's capable of. And he still looks the part. He still looks like a Greek god and everything else. Rookie Zach Gentry, very large individual. I think he's going to make us forget about Jesse James in due time. I was actually kind of blown away because I wasn't expecting a whole lot, and he seems like he's catching everything in those catcher mitts hands that he has, and we got to see him block. We got to see him, in pads. We got to see him in a game situation. So watching in the preseason is going to be interesting. But for all intents and purposes, right now, I'm thinking he's going to get some yards after the catch that Jesse had a problem with. He may be a little maybe like a smidge more athletic than Jesse was. We'll see if he can break some tackles in that. Kevin Rader, my Youngstown State guy, I really think he's on the outside looking in, but he's been catching a lot of balls too and hasn't looked too bad. We were actually kind of shocked at this. Me and Brian were debating whether or not they would allow the long snapper / tight end Trevor Wood from Texas A&M to take reps at tight end, and he has been quite a few actually. So the Steelers are looking at his versatility. And Christian Scotland Williamson, the UK transfer that there's still no solid answer anywhere on the interwebs that we can find, but it appears we're going to go based on the previous year of the NFL where, the AFC North was this designated player pathway, the International Player Pathway Program division, where everyone got an extra player on the roster. That player doesn't count against, their actual roster during camp, during preseason, so they have 91 instead of 90. That's where Christian Scotland-Williamson comes in. If he's on the practice squad, he won't count either. But if they use that exemption through the Player Pathway Program, he also cannot be activated at any time during the season. So last year he could not be activated during the regular season, and this year he cannot. Now, this is where we're surmising, because last year the previous division, who I want to say was the NFC North, maybe, they had those players were invited back, and they were all permitted to have that same exemption. So it wasn't just the 4 players in the AFC North, 1 per each team, but the NFC North had that same thing too. And it appears this year that's going to be the same thing, that all the AFC North teams, they have all of their players returning from the Player Pathway Program. Not all of them are from the UK either. I think there's a guy from Germany. There's I'm trying to think. There's like somebody that the Patriots are working out as a fullback, since the AFC East is I almost said the AFC least, which almost. But they have somebody too. They have, each of those teams has a player. So it looks like all 8 players in the program this year are still in it. And I don't know, someone was saying something about it's a 2-year thing, but there's nothing in the NFL operations manual or anything I could find. So if somebody sees that and they see it from a reputable source, please let us know, because there's like blogs and stuff that are just throwing this at the wall and just saying, well, they're allowed to have them for 2 years. And it's like, well, there's been conflicting information even about beat writers. I think there's been at least 2 gentlemen from the Post-Gazette who thought, Scotland-Williamson did not have an exemption for the regular season this year. So we'll just leave that at that. The tight end group, though, I don't think it's all doom and gloom as we think, and Vance McDonald is somebody who is going to create some these mismatch problems, because then when you put Juju out there, if he has to be covered by a linebacker, this is the famous Vince Williams on Keenan Allen type thing that the Chargers were doing. This is going to be the same thing that the Steelers are going to be able to do when they have Vance and Juju. If they go like 3 wide and they have Vance out there too, they're going to create a lot of mismatch problems. We haven't even gotten to the running backs and some of the things that they're doing there, but I'm not as concerned at the moment through 3 days of camp so far, Zach, about the tight end group. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think the biggest thing for Vance McDonald is going to be just his health. Like, if he can stay healthy for a full 16-game season, if he can do that, I think this is going to be a monster season for him. He's playing like a man possessed, just like Juju is, and he's just a grown-ass man. I mean, you see some of the plays he's making, one-handed grabs, just out-muscling the defenders, and this comes back to the whole practice thing. Well, does that mean the defense isn't playing that well? No, they are playing well. Vance McDonald is just a grown man who's just bullying people on the field. I think if he can do that consistently over the course of the season, I mean, he's going to be an exciting threat in the end zone. He's going to be an exciting threat over the middle of the field. I think there could be more stiff arms involved in this play this year. If I get fans excited from that Buccaneers game last year. But I think Xavier Grimble's fine as number 2. I know Elite Law fans give him slack, and they view that drop off is what needs the team to go and actually reach out for another tight end. But I think Grimble, for the role he'll be doing, I think he's been arguably the best blocking tight end the Steelers have had since Heath Miller retired. Those heavy sets where you're going to see him in there blocking. But I also think he's athletic enough when called upon to make plays down the field. And, there's that touchdown against the Ravens. I know it stands out as one of my favorite plays, where he just ripped the seam right apart, went right down the field, caught the ball for a touchdown in that Christmas game with the immaculate extension. So, I think I'm excited to see what he can do this year with more of a featured role on the offense. But Gentry's been the guy I've been the most surprised about. I know, I think a lot of college systems today, either you're a great receiver, you're a great blocker, and if you can do both, typically you're a top 10 tight end, like a TJ Hawkinson type. Very seldomly do you see a guy who can do it both, and I think that's going to be Gentry's biggest issue in the NFL, is just trying to develop that blocking ability. I think if he can get that down while still being a nuanced receiver, I think realistically he could be a very solid depth tight end for the Steelers. And keep in mind, he hasn't played the tight end position very long. He's been 2-3 years, I think, since he came to Michigan and started playing quarterback. So I think realistically, he has a long way to go. But I think as a receiver, the potential is there, especially if he can get the nuances of being a blocker down. I think it will be interesting to see how he develops in that regard with the Steelers.
Yeah, and speaking of guys that are going to be doing some blocking and maybe some little bit of a different role, but still, we're seeing some multiple, guys in the backfield. And we saw Zach Gentry actually line up in the backfield once or twice with our own eyes. He was actually being, kind of guided there, almost like an H-back position. So that'll be interesting to see, where he may line up on the field too. We saw this when they had David Johnson at one point, and they're trying things. We may not ever see it at all. And that's kind of, one of the things where when they put like two running backs in the backfield, there's been some James Conner and Jalen Samuels type of formations. And these are the type of things I'm talking about when I was talking about, linebackers and or safeties and, creating mismatches and, the whole doom and gloom of, oh my God, the Cleveland Browns are an all-star team this year. And you're going to keep hearing me say this until we get to the regular season, and I'm either going to be right or wrong. And we all have our reservations about it. But this is the way the Steelers are going to be attacking teams. Of course, we know James Conner is, and he looks as sharp as ever. And he's been getting a little bit of like rest and maybe not as many snaps as you normally see. Quite surprisingly, actually, not even the amount that Jalen Samuels is getting. Of course, you would expect being year two and being the primary backup with no Stephen Ridley there anymore. But we are seeing some of Benny Snell, and Benny Snell hits the hole fast. He hits hard. He looks like he's going to be an impressive back, and he's probably, he may even have a shot of just being the primary backup because Jalen Samuels is like a utility player that they're going to move around again like a chess piece, like you'd mentioned with Juju Smith-Schuster there, Zach. A couple of other guys that are getting some snaps, though, Trey Edmonds and Ralph Webb, and they're making some noise, and they've even gotten some looks with the ones and twos here or there. And, of course, Trey is a brother of Terrell Edmonds, and Ralph Webb, very interesting as well, and he hasn't looked bad. I mean, it looks like there's quite a bit of depth there, and these are some names maybe to look for the practice squad. But overall, just kind of something. I know it seems a little quick, but there isn't a whole lot to say about running backs. I mean, it is what it is when the guys. We're not even going to talk a whole lot about offensive or defensive line because when they don't have pads on and they're not really blocking or hitting or anything like that, these are somewhat routine type plays, although I will say Ben audibled a 7 shots play and did a sneak and got everyone riled up, I think, because he fooled the defense and they were all like, ha, I got you. And it was like, well, what exactly are you going to do there? For anybody who's not familiar to 7 shots, they're a few yards out on like the goal line, and the whole objective is there for the offense to score and the defense to stop them, and the defense has actually been winning a lot of those battles here or there. I guess I'll throw the rest of the backfield in here real quick, too, because, obviously there was Ben and he had a day off, but, maybe we won't go to the quarterbacks yet. Anything else on the running backs here? I mean, the observation we made with Snell, I think, was fairly similar to the point of even saying he may look a little more crisper than even James Conner did during his rookie year.
Yeah, no, I think so far, it's been early again. All these takes are still early, but I think, with Benny Snell, I think his explosion is there. I think he's quicker. He's finishing every single run he gets through the end zone, which is great effort. But I think he's at a place right now where I'm almost a little more impressed with him right now than I was in 2017 with James Conner. And I think realistically he has a chance to be the primary backup, and that's nothing against Jalen Samuels. It's more so just how they plan on using Samuels, because I think coming out, Samuels was advertised as this multifaceted guy. He can move around all over the field. Have 2 running back sets, put them out in the slot, put them out wide, put them at tight end, put them at H-back, whatever. I think he kind of fits that mold. I think Samuels is going to get more touches this year than Benny Snell. That's no question. Snell's going to get some reps because I think he's more in line with what they have with James Conner. And I think that's going to bode well for them trying to get the similar looks while still keeping Jalen Samuels in the mix. So I think all 3 backs are going to get looks this year, with Conner still as the primary and Jalen Samuels being the move around piece. But the depth they have there too. I mean, Trey Edmonds has been impressive throughout the course of the offseason and so far in training camp. And Ralph Webb, is trying to make a name for himself. I mean, after they spent some time with the Patriots last year and the Buccaneers, I mean, he's looking to stick somewhere. I could very easily see him being a practice squad target. Become the 6th all-time leading rusher in the SEC by accident. That takes some level of talent. And I think Ralph Webb has that. He kind of fits the mold of a running back the Steelers don't have on the roster right now because he isn't the biggest guy. I mean, he's 5'10", 5'9", like 200 pounds. So he's not a big guy, and he's quick. And I think the Steelers could use someone like that giving him some opportunities and some options there. So I could see him sticking around long term, kind of lingering on the practice squad, maybe trying to make a move up if Connor or Samuels or anyone ever gets hurt during the season. So time will tell, but I like this running back group as well. I think they complement each other very well, and I think there's opportunities to move them around and get different looks again to help give you mismatches against defenses.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just jumping into quarterback so we leave enough time to talk about defense here. The young guys, Mason Rudolph has looked very sharp. He looks like he is improved even from last year, and he'll even remind you of Ben at certain points, and he can definitely throw a deep ball. He seems to have quite a bit of precision. He can move around in the pocket a little bit. Josh Dobbs can obviously move around a lot, but it almost seems like from my observation, Josh was leaning on that a little too much here early in camp, and there's going to be a lot made of him throwing a few interceptions. Now, one of them was a tipped ball that was right in the hands of Tevin Jones, but Brian Allen, what year is Allen in now? 4? 3? 4? Yeah, and I mean, he looks like he's been doing his homework and that he has developed into the guy that everybody wants him to be early on. He jumped the route and he read Josh Dobbs' mind and just picked him off in one of the 7-shot drills. And then Dobbs had thrown another one, actually, like back-to-back. And, that's not good for his confidence right there. But I don't want to make it sound like Josh Dobbs is bad by any means. He had some deep passes that looked really nice. There's been some balls that have gotten tipped too here or there. Somebody gets a hand on it. So, he's still the guy that he was last year. He's still a leader on the field. He still looks every bit as sharp. It just so happens he's the guy who gets picked on just a little bit because the second team defense got to him. I mean, that's all the more you could say the defense was winning the battle there, and that type of stuff's going to happen. Devlin Hodges is interesting. I know a lot of people were talking about him, and you get these, the stuff that people talk about in June and July when there's nothing else to talk about. He's the 4th quarterback on the depth chart, a very deep quarterback depth chart for the Steelers, where they have maybe 2 bona fide guys who could be backups in Mason Rudolph and Josh Dobbs. And Hodges coming out of my love for the small colleges, your FCS schools. He was a Samford guy. He put up a lot of yards there, and you could see why. I mean, he's a smaller guy, but he seems to take command of the offense. He's maybe not the most mobile quarterback that's out there on the field, especially when you talk about the other guys that are ahead of him. But his arm is just it's like a laser beam when he throws the ball. That ball gets there, and it gets there fast. And that's what actually surprised me with some of the balls that he throws. When you have somebody like Zach Gentry actually haul that pass in, I'm like, geez, man, he threw that ball so hard you could hear it up in the stands. You could hear the smack when it hits his gloves. So any other observations here with the quarterback? I think just based on what we talked about with the receivers making plays, that the quarterbacks are having a pretty solid camp so far.
Yeah, no, I think Mason Rudolph has done a great job. I think the best thing that the Steelers can have happen is have Rudolph be their number 2. I think that's good long term. I think it's good for Rudolph long term. I think he looks a lot more comfortable this year than he did last year. He looks like he understands the offense more. Where he should have gotten rid of the ball sooner. He should have thrown it away or checked down to somebody, but he didn't. I think that's just getting used and getting experience, especially coming from a vertical offense like they have in the Oklahoma State. But I think Rudolph has looked good. I think he's looked a lot calmer. He's making a lot better throws and a lot better decisions. Like you said, Dobbs hasn't been bad by any means. I think from what I've understood yesterday was a much better day but again, he's still learning just as much as Rudolph is. And I think both of them competing with each other are going to bring out the best in each other. We saw how Dobbs responded last year whenever Landry Jones was competing for that job. He stepped up to the plate and took it. And I think having Rudolph here is going to keep him in that fight or flight mentality. I think he's going to get the best out of it. And I think that's going to only bode well for the Steelers long term. And like you said, Devin Hodges, I'm convinced Hodges just has a cannon attached to his body. I mean, the way he throws that ball, it's similar to like we saw from Brett Favre. I'm not comparing him to Brett Favre. I'm just simply talking about how quick the ball comes out, how strong it is when he's throwing it. I mean, it's like he's throwing a fast pitch. In baseball as a pitcher, so I think his chances are slim to make this roster, and by slim I mean about less than 1%. I think even if an injury would happen, the Steelers would go for outside help before they would ever rely on Hodges. But I think he's auditioning at this point for a job in the NFL. And I think so far from what we've seen from him, I don't know if he's ever going to be anything in the NFL, but I think he at least has earned a chance to stick around for a couple of years and see if he can, develop and learn the nuances of being a quarterback. But, he has the FCS pedigree, and I'm hoping that, he can kind of take somewhere in the league, because he definitely has the arm. It's just a matter of the mental processing, and if his size will ever become an issue for him. But, time will tell with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I'm not going to say a whole lot about offensive line. I mean, we saw Matt Filer basically with the ones. I mean, he was the starter when Marcus Gilbert went down last year. He is competing, it looks like, with Chuck Okorafor, mainly for that right tackle spot. The rest of the offensive line, I mean, we know the names. Not really a whole lot to say there. I don't think we want to cut into that right now. We could always bounce back around to it at a later time. And you know what? Let's mention the fullback, Rosie Nix. Some people are talking about how he was involved in the passing game. That has happened since he caught that fluke kind of pass from the Ravens in that Ravens game. That has been ever since now. It's like, oh, he could catch. And we saw some of that last year, so it's not really new. Jumping over to the defense, that side of the ball, I mean, defensive line, there's not a whole lot of judging that you got going on there. More or less what we get to look at is kind of the linebackers. TJ Watt has been, on the injured, I don't want to say the injured list. What is he technically? PUP list? I don't even know it's PUP list. Is it PUP list to start the camp? They're just babying him with the hamstring. He says he's feeling okay and he's going to get out there eventually. And in his spot is Anthony Chickalo. Bud Dupree's still out there too. A lot is being made of Ola Adonai. I know I said don't count him as just a shoe-in on the roster, so to speak. But there's a lot of hype that's coming with that. The only reason I say that is it's like, hey, look, this is a guy that fought to make the roster last year. Clearly, if he's on the bottom half of the roster, he's got to make that same argument this year. He was an undrafted guy. He doesn't have any of that pedigree. So don't read too much into that. I still think he's a guy that ends up making the 53. And, of course, with all the noise coming out of camp, you've heard all the stuff with the backs on backers and how he was basically unblockable, that it still is the second-team Steelers guys that are, he's facing. So it's going to be he's going to be one to definitely watch in the preseason when we get there. And I don't know, Zach, that we have is a whole lot more that we can say about at least the outside linebacker crew, because there's not a whole lot of activity going on there. It's not like they're blitzing or doing anything exotic. It's very vanilla type stuff right now. So there isn't a whole lot I can even say about, Sutton Smith, for example, or anybody like that. Really, it's just that Ola kind of owned the backs on backers deal, and everything else is kind of like, I guess business as usual is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing from Dupree. I think Dupree looks trimmer this year. I know he's playing for contract, so I expect some things from him. I know fans will disagree, but, we'll see. I think this ultimately ends up probably being his last year in Pittsburgh. And Anthony Chickalo is always good in camp. It's nothing new, especially with the opportunity to play in place of Watt while he's recovering from that hamstring issue from the conditioning test. But, I think Ola has been the standout, especially against the second and third team guys, which you want to see. You want to see a guy dominating those levels, and that's how you're going to convince the coaching staff to get you reps with the ones. I know you said otherwise, but I think he is a lock to make the roster just due to the lack of depth that's on this depth chart right now.
Oh no, let me clarify. This was from the previous episode, and we were just talking about the numbers game, so to speak. The Steelers actually did go in with only 3 outside linebackers last year, and he was on IR, and then they brought him back, and they ended up with 4. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not saying he's not. I'm not saying he's an outside looking in. I'm just saying, hey, he's the number 4 still. You know what I mean? And it looks like he's going to hold on to that spot. It doesn't look like he's in any danger right now. And even to that degree, I mean, Sutton Smith is getting some reps, and he's in there, with guys like Robert Spillane and Tazar Skipper, and who else is out there? JT Jones. And I mean, of those 4, and I don't know. I did see see Sutton beat someone. It looked like something that was on his film. He kind of cut outside and came inside. But this is like, again, a microcosm. These things aren't showing up. Ola showed up by just, smacking people around yesterday. So, but otherwise, I don't know that we saw a whole lot. It's very hard to judge. Sometimes I'm using my binoculars to look over at the far side of the field, and you still can't make out numbers and stuff. So that's why we got a little bit more on the offense. Though we do have some things to say about the inside linebacker group, because people are going to want to know everything about Devin Bush, and Devin Bush looks like the real deal. I mean, He had a big pass breakup, on the first day of practice, and there was a lot made about that. It even showed up on the interview with Aditi Kikawala of NFL Network later that night, and I was kind of smiling about that because it's like, okay, it's like one play. Nobody wants to get a big head over just one play that happened in one day of practice, but it's encouraging to see because all the things we just talked about with, trying to create mismatches, especially against other AFC North teams and their inside linebackers and, their linebackers and their secondary and things of that nature. Devin Bush looks like the answer, and he is being worked out almost consistently. He has had a mix with Mark Barron, maybe not as much that was noticeable. Barron's been quiet, but that's also a good thing. But Devin Bush has been quiet and made noise, and he's been out there almost consistently as the lone kind of linebacker whenever they put in some of the sub packages. So I don't know. There's not maybe. I think the only other thing that may be a surprise, Zach, out of all this is that we saw Tigray Scales come in with the second team and Tyler Matakevich. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot I think to say about Vince Williams, for example, or anyone else. Any other observations with the entire linebacker crew? I guess we probably don't have to go through everyone because at most we're watching them in pass coverage. We're not seeing any blitzing or anything of that nature at this time. And Devin Bush obviously is the guy that all eyes are on. And you know what? He looks like a premium athlete at this point.
Oh, 100%. And I think that play that you were talking about with that James Conner kind of running out to the flats after staying in pass pro. I mean, Devin Bush was out on that, made up the ground, came back and showed off his athleticism and ball skills all in one play. And I think that type of play kind of encapsulates what you're hoping to see from him this year. The athleticism, the ball skills, the getting from point to point, being in a hurry, playing downhill. I mean, that's everything you want to see from him. And I don't think he's been a massive standout so far, but there's enough to see what he's done to make you excited about what he's going to bring once the world pads go on and, we're playing against somebody else that's not just another guy in white or yellow. So I think he is as advertised so far. The athletic traits are there. He's getting the playbook. I think the fact that they have him in with the ones as early as they do shows that he is comfortable or getting more comfortable with the playbook, which I think is huge for his development because the quicker you can get him on the field and the quicker you can get him getting snaps and reps, the better he is going to be because he's not your average rookie. He's a very high IQ player. He has a pedigree that you don't see very often from Steelers first-round draft picks. So I think realistically, it's a guy you're going to want on the field early and often, just due to the boost he's going to give you from an athletic standpoint. But I was surprised to see Tigray Scales be as early in with the defense as he was. I mean, obviously the depth chart is not shaken out, and the Steelers just be getting different looks. But on that first day, he was getting looks before guys like Tyler Matakevich was, and I thought that was pretty surprising to me. Just due to the fact that Tigray Scales was an undrafted free agent a year ago who wasn't with the team until this winter. So I think realistically him getting snaps as early as he is, I'm a big fan of Scales. I was shocked that he went undrafted last year. I'd like to see what he can do this year. I think he probably, unless he ends up jumping a guy like Matakevich, I think he ends up being a practice squad type caliber player. But he's been exciting to watch, and I want to see more of him. I want to see more of Ulysses Gilbert because I think both of those guys have interesting skill sets they can bring to the defense over a guy like Matakevich. But he's a guy that I think once he's in there, he's going to be reliable. I think he's going to be a better version of what the Steelers were hoping to get from Morgan Burnett last year. But I think this linebacker group is in a better place now with Williams, Bush, Barron, and whomever else, and they were last year with Williams and Bostic and Burnett, as I air quote. So I think they were in a better position right now to have success. They're more athletic. I think they're smarter than they were. I think Vince Williams will be allowed to play to his skill set better, which will give him that kind of ability we saw whenever he was playing next to Ryan Shazier back in 2017 before that untimely injury. to Shazier. I think that'll only help the team out better. So I'm excited to see what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, geez, I don't even know. I think the secondary is probably, that's what we have left. And there's a lot of promise there too. I mean, the only thing that ends up happening here is I think we saw on like some consecutive plays is Ben still is just a master at reading and picking apart the coverage that's in front of him. And we saw, there was a video I put out on the official Steel City Underground site that said, or on the Twitter account anyway, and it said Juju is a cheat code, and everybody's like, there's the secondary, they're just being bad. No, Juju is beating everybody. There was a ball that Ben put on Juju that only Ben, he's the only guy that could put it there, and Juju has to have the talent to be able to catch it where it's placed. And Mike Hilton is in perfect coverage, and they still made the play. We saw Steven Nelson do the same thing, and Steven Nelson has been covering Juju a lot, but he wasn't the only one because Joe Hayden got beat on a big play too. And we saw Juju crawl around on all fours afterwards. They're like both on the ground, and he's just kind of, in Joe's face over it. And it's not because Joe Hayden sucks or Steven Nelson sucks or anybody like that, because these guys are getting it done too. Trust me. They're especially you'll see this when Dobbs or Rudolph comes in, and they may come in with some of the ones. You got kind of a mix, and you're trying to see how these guys work together, and they're holding on to the ball like forever. You know what I mean? And even Ben had to throw one in the dirt at one point. I think it was during the 7 shots. The defense did not give up anything, and there's plays. Ben tried to hit Juju in the corner on a little back shoulder fade, and he didn't get both feet out, and Steven Nelson shut him down on that too. There's a lot to be excited about here. So this is just it's very exciting to see this and see the progress. Now, I know Sean Davis, they were looking at his hand yesterday. We're going to see what ends up going on with that. Filling in for him has been Cameron Kelly. This is the guy from the the Alliance of American Football we were talking about, the San Diego Fleet guy that was already getting like some reps with the ones in the OTAs and the mini camps and whatnot. And he's the guy who's been primarily there with the twos, and then he steps in and ends up with the ones and is kind of doing an admiral job there, And then you also have with the twos, he's usually paired with Marcus Allen, who would be the strong safety in that case. The corners in that situation are Artie Burns or Brian Allen. We haven't quite even seen, Justin Lane is still a rookie kind of working his way up there. Now, Artie Burns has been, day one, I don't know that he necessarily, it didn't seem like he had the fire that was like, hey, this could be it. You know what I mean? He's had the fire the last couple days, and almost to the point where I think he's going to end up in a fight with somebody. I mean, he looks PO'd, and that's good. That may be a good thing. And I know, we talk about who gets beat here or there. Everybody is getting beat, so I don't want to say, hey, Artie Burns gets beat on this play because, Brian Allen's been beat. I said Hayden's been beat, Nelson's been beat. But overall, the secondary, it looks like a major improvement from where this team was even like maybe a year or two ago. I'm going to throw Cam Sutton out there as well, although he's been mostly playing the nickel role. They've been working him in for like the Mike Hilton kind of spot there too. And Mike Hilton's looked pretty good. A few other names we'll throw out. Herb Waters, who's been around. Jordan Dangerfield, everyone's very, very familiar with him too. It's been interesting, to say the least. And I want to say even P.J. Locke, who's an undrafted free agent, the rookie that's in camp, I think he came away with a pick or a near pick too. Brian Allen's had a handful of them so far in camp, and I think Sutton has too. So they're creating splash, and we're watching them work on splash plays as well, because we saw a lot of ball security type drills too, Zach, where they're swatting at the ball and things of that nature, and they're even doing it while they're running some of these offense and defensive drills together, and you're getting to see them run like some of these plays. They're taking swipes at people, and Ryan Switzer knocked one away just yesterday that was picked off. So this is it looks different out there this year. Not only the secondary, I know you want to talk about a few of your guys here, but overall the team looks like a team. It just has a different vibe this year. It really does.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody recently, and I said I haven't felt the way that I've felt at a Steelers training camp practice in quite a few years that I did over this past weekend. I feel like there's such a bigger bond this year amongst the players, and I feel like they're paying a lot closer attention to detail and trying to improve on some of the things they messed up with last year. Like I know one of the big things was, turnovers, the lack of turnovers. And you see these linebackers and DBs on the jugs machine before practice, during practice, after practice. They're working on their ball disruption skills. They're trying to get better at forcing turnovers because the turnover rate they had last year was simply unacceptable, especially if you're trying to be a Super Bowl contending team like I know the Steelers are trying to be. But I think that starts with the guys up front. You have the D linemen; they're throwing their hands up more often now on passes that try to disrupt passing lanes. Which, if you ever played offensive and defensive line, you know how crucial that can be to keep the defensive lineman's hands down to help your quarterback out. The linebackers are doing a good job trying to get the ball loose, and the DBs are with picks and turnovers. And I think that's going to be huge for the long-term success of the Steelers' defense. But I think Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson, if Joe Hayden's playing very well, I think that's first and foremost. And I think that a lot of this season will hinge on him doing as well as he has been. As long as he stays healthy, again, he's in the same kind of boat as Vance McDonald. His health will be imperative to how well that position group plays, because if Hayden stays healthy, I think they'll have success. So I think Steven Nelson has kind of been as advertised. He's a guy that's going to get you splash plays. He's going to be solid in coverage, and he's probably going to let up one or two plays that, you might kind of be like, well, he could have made that, but he didn't. But I think that's better than what the Steelers have had opposite of Hayden over the last couple seasons. I think they've had a kind of a floodgate door at that spot. I think Nelson will be an improvement in that regard. But Brian Allen has been my defensive surprise of camp. It's his third year, and he hadn't really played a whole lot of corner to this point. He had been a receiver, converted to corner, I think, his last year at Utah, and then he kind of just jumped to the league. So he's a guy that, again, needed to learn how to play the position. But when you're 6'3", 215 pounds, you can make a lot of stuff up. I think we're seeing him finally starting to get comfortable at that spot to the point where he might get some more reps, be a special teams contributor like he has been, and maybe even sneak on some relief role on defense, which would be great for the Steelers. But again, Cameron Kelly, going back to the whole filling in for Sean Davis thing, I made this comment with a previous podcast with Brian. People are quick to dismiss the whole he's getting reps during OTAs with the first team because it's OTAs and no one really cares about that. But you seem to forget that Mike Hilton was in the same exact position a couple of years ago, and then he ended up stealing the job away when it's all said and done. Now, I don't think healthy Sean Davis loses his job to Cam Kelly, but I think realistically Cameron Kelly is a guy the Steelers feel comfortable enough at this point getting first-team reps when Davis isn't in there compared to someone like Cam Sutton bumping the free safety or a guy who's been around a little bit more. So I think him getting reps there shows the Steelers like him a lot. I think he's held his own for the most, learning the nuances of that because he also has bumped around from corner to safety. He's played some receiver whenever he was with the AAF. So I think, he's a guy that surprised me. I think he's going to continue to get some looks there. But at playing that free safety spot, it's so hard to gauge how good you're actually going to be until you start seeing some of that live action against other teams. So I think realistically having a guy like Cam Kelly in there, relieving him early right now and getting the experience with the ones and getting comfortable with the calls and the guys, and I think that'll be good for them. But I want to see more out of Marcus Allen. I want to see more out of Artie Burns kind of wrapping this DB part up. Marcus Allen's a guy I think is going to be your primary number 3 safety. I think he's going to be the guy that comes in some of those dime backer roles whenever Mark Barron's not on the field. I think he's going to be your premier reserve strong safety behind Terrell Edmonds. And Artie Burns, again, I'm going down with the sinking ship. I don't care. I'm going to hope for the best from him. I'm going to hope that he turns into some sort of player at some point in time, whether it's with the Steelers or somebody else. But I agree that he's been playing kind of PO'd and wanting to make a name for himself because he knows what's on the line here. He knows his job's at risk. He knows the Steelers didn't offer him a 5th-year option. So it's now or never. Either you make the play and you become good and try to stick around and say, hey, I need to be on this team. I need to be playing. You guys need me. Or he fizzles out and he ends up somewhere else and he bounces around the league for a little bit. And I think he knows what's at risk here. And I think the Steelers drafting Justin Lane early like they did, and I think them signing Steven Nelson hopefully lit a fire under Artie Burns where he's going to step up, start doing some things, and start pushing himself. Because, again, the raw talent, the confidence has not. We've seen enough from Artie Burns over the first 2 years of his career to say, well, he can make plays and he can do it. But in 2018, it was rough. It was really hard to watch him a lot of times. And quite frankly, if you're getting benched consistently for Cody Sensabaugh, who wasn't even on the roster when you were drafted, I think that kind of screams emergency right there. So hopefully he can pick it up, and get relaxed and make some plays and get that confidence back, even if it's not with the Steelers in the future and some other team. You don't want to see a guy fizzle out with his pedigree simply because of a confidence issue. So hopefully he does it. But like you said, this DB group, I feel halfway decent about at this point in time. I think, there's still a lot of questions, and it's hard to really gauge them until you start seeing some live action against other teams. But, I think right now they're deeper than they have been, even if their talent isn't necessarily always there. They're deeper with guys that you might feel more comfortable playing than you have in previous years, and I think that will help them out. And if the turnovers start showing up and they can start forcing things to get the ball back in the offense's hand, I think that'll make all the difference in the world of how gifted this defense could truly be in 2019 and beyond.
Yeah, and also a good thing to maybe point out, too, is some of the special teams work. We mentioned some of the return work, but we were watching, some of the gunners and, some of the coverage drills, too. And Artie Burns is in that mix, and oddly, so is James Washington. We don't expect that to last for too long. Justin Lane is in that group. Who else were we looking at? Was Deontay Spencer over there, too? I'm trying to remember. I don't think so, because or was he? Because he's a returner. It was basically a mix of DBs, and I think Washington was the only white jersey, which would be wide receivers. I'm not sure there was another one, but it was definitely like Burns, Lane, Cam Sutton, and guys like that. So Artie Burns may be expected to contribute more as a special teams guy if he hangs around. And you just never know, too. Other teams, as injuries and other things pile up, there could be some, late draft picks that another team offers for a trade for a guy who was a former first-round draft pick, much in the same way that Steelers acquired Justin Gilbert a few years ago from the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, we know how that worked out. So, it's worth the risk for another team, and maybe the Steelers can put another pick in their back pocket. And when they have a lot of draft picks, you see what happens. They're able to make moves and do things like they did in the draft this year. So all the rookies look promising. I think, the biggest name, obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, there's nobody else outside of that, I think I would talk about. I think Devin Bush looks like the real deal, and all of the other guys that we talked about, this is continue to watch and see. We're up against it. I would cover the special team stuff, but just know that Chris Boswell went 8 for 8 on some of his kicks, and he looks like he has plenty of leg. Matthew Wright also the same way, but they didn't really kick very far out. I think 40 yards may have been the furthest. Nobody was trying to 50, and Matthew Wright had plenty of leg on the close ones as he went a little further out. Looks like Boswell's very strong. Looks like he may be back to form, and also important is these guys, Chris Boswell has the support of his teammates. I tweeted something out just yesterday because I'd forgotten that Cam Hayward was the first guy who came up, butted helmets with him, high-fived him, held him there for a second. Imagine he said something to him real close, like, hell yeah, or something like that. And, they're behind him. They want to see him back to his Pro Bowl form, and he looked pretty solid there too. So just want to throw that in. We are up against it. Apologize for any technical issues that we had with this program. But otherwise, we love you, Zach. Thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Hopefully it wasn't too unbearable to listen to.
comes with the territory, you know what I mean? We're dealing with technology, and sometimes technology is only as good as the people using it. So we'll throw that out there. But anyways, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, everyone. We'll be back with some more training camp stuff at the end of the week, maybe some other miscellaneous notes. Steelers had the Hall of Honor and things like that we didn't get to really cover. So we'll boomerang back to that and tune into us then. It may even be, we've been running on Thursdays. This one may even come Friday. We'll see, because the Steelers, they do get a break on Tuesday, and then they go 5 days in a row. So we'll try and cram as much news as we can, just a little bit of programming note there. So until next time, my name's Joe. His name's Zach. Encourage all of our listeners to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.